Back in the day, when asked for some classic but not too old science fiction to read, my first suggestion to any budding readers would always be to ask, have you tried Peter F. Hamilton? When I was younger and looking to upgrade for short stories or young adult science fiction, when I wanted something gritty to sink my teeth into, the Night's Dawn trilogy hooked me perfectly. But this recommendation comes with a clear warning. The reality Dysfunction is a long book. It's over 1,225 pages in fact, and even then it gives only the first chapter of a truly epic story that spans multiple solar systems, species and planes of existence. If I had to sum up Peter Hamilton's achievement here in one word, I would simply use epic. I don't mean epic as per its common usage now either. I mean epic purely in terms of size. This is a brute of a book, an unwieldy behemoth so hard to define because it encompasses everything. It is all things at once: space drama, supernatural horror, political thriller, teenage melodrama, erotic fantasy. If judged purely on scope of ambition, this is an excellent start to a new series. Yet it's, above all other things, difficult. For each of the first 10 chapters in the book, it presents brand new characters, brand new worlds, a brand new story, each of which could easily be a book in their own right. There are many long words and difficult concepts that take time to sink in, and honest to gods, the actual plot doesn't start until page 400. This is not a read for the meek. I would also caution readers not to visit the Wikipedia page for this series, which is conceptually named Night's Dawn. It very bluntly states one of the key secrets of this novel, the true identity of the enemy, something that the author takes great pains to keep hidden until the final third of the book. I won't mention that spoiler in this review, but trust me, whether you end up liking or disliking the concept, the book is better if you don't know it in advance. Knowing it, I kept waiting for a revelation that never properly came, just slowly planted, piece by piece, until it was finally acknowledged as a fact. Perhaps due to its sheer scope, some things get lost along the way. Several characters who at first appear really important simply disappear once the book does start to gain momentum, presumably to return in a sequel. Syrinx, who at first could appear to be the central heroine, simply vanishes after the halfway mark, never really to be mentioned again. A shame, as I honestly thought she was one of the most interesting characters in the book, although in retrospect she exists solely to introduce us to Edenist culture. It eventually transpires the central character is Joshua Calvert, who undergoes a journey from a stricken scavenger to a plucky starship captain to a reluctant war hero. The author has admitted to writing a very straightforward Han Solo character, and there's none more straightforward than this. Every decision Joshua makes is the correct one, or it later turns out to have been correct, and he is proven only to be fallible by his inaction, and even in those cases he has an uncomfortable itch that something wrong is going down. There's potential for depth here, and a slight leaning towards a personal journey. At the end, another character lightly reprimands him for his appalling attitude towards women, and he admits, yeah, he can be a bit of a douche. But the truth is, Joshua is a fairly bland character. He never really rises above the archetype. It's a shame because he takes up so much space when he's surrounded by so many more fascinating stories that are only briefly touched on. One of those interesting concepts is Ione, the female ruler of the space station Tranquility, who is bonded with the ship. At first it looks like this will be a fascinating exploration of absolute power, as Ione starts the book as a secret ruler who reveals herself to the population and takes Joshua on as a consort. But from there she fills only 2 roles, a handy viewpoint for exposition dumps about the backstory, and many sexual encounters with Joshua and others. In fact, if I have one real complaint, it's the book's attitude to women. There are plenty of strong independent females, but all of them, without fail, are shown in predominantly sexual light, particularly in their relation to Joshua Calvert. I suppose the other standout characters include Father Horst, a failed priest looking for a chance to start a new life, who fails and falls into a drunken stupor, and then redeems himself later. Though an excellent story, his parts are small and fragmented, spread thinly amongst the larger arcs Joshua is weaving. Of the villains, Quinn Dexter stands out early on as a convicted criminal banished to a work camp on the frontier world who plans his escape. Sadly, just as Quinn finally fulfills his ambition, he also pretty much drops out of the story, just after page 500. Leighton is billed as a potential new evil to supplant Quinn, but his story is kept largely hidden from the reader in order to protect vital secrets. In truth, there are so many points of view characters, the above barely cover 2/3 of the book. After such a hectic and broad introduction, I presume that by page 700, Peter Hamilton would have created enough disparate threads and would now start to weave them together into one narrative. Yet to the very end, he constantly adds new vital characters and settings. The tragedy of Space Station Rubra, the Irishman seeing Wallace, etc. It's not as though the book doesn't have an ending. It comes to a very neat conclusion, tying up the story of Lalonde with a brilliant act of bravery from Joshua and crew, but 90% of the things introduced are left hanging. This book successfully climbs to the top of a genre of big, expansion, high concept science fiction, written at a time in the early 1990s when it seemed anything was possible. It plays conceptually with ideas about how society will react to great expansion into the wider universe, with space fleets and disparate societies, and with new cultures emerging based around genetic manipulation and mechanical biotechnology. This is not predictive fiction. The science is fast and loose, so Peter F. Hamilton has gone on record to say he prefers the term speculative fiction, a way of taking vast conceptual ideas and just exploring the possibilities for new storytelling vehicles. Based on this book, he became one of the most well-known space opera authors of the early 21st century. As a man who used to work in a plastics factory, who was there watching as the synthetic man-made material rolled off the production line and reshaped the world as we know it, he shows great perception for imagining how future disruptive technologies could cause future schisms in our society. This is only the first third of a trilogy, and Peter Hamilton leaves plenty of fertile ground for his sequels. There are flaws in the narrative, things that could have been tidier, and elements of indulgence from the author that can't be overlooked, but the sheer scope and epic scale of the story are undeniable. Recommended only for strong sci-fi readers with plenty of patience, but well worth the reward if you approach it with an open mind. A 90s classic well worth looking up.